Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-founder of Denver Startup Week. I'm so excited to bring all of these dreamers and visionaries together. Our country was built on capitalism, entrepreneurs drive that, and we could all use a little bit of dreaming right now. We're able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our sponsors. Join me in thanking our 2020 Denver Startup Week sponsors. Our title sponsors, Downtown Denver Partnership, JP Morgan Chase, Prologis, and Zero. Our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible. Battery 621 and the Public Works, Capital One Cafe, Colorado Lending Source, Friday Health, Quizlet, Exactly, Zayo, and Zestful. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement of this week to you. Thank you to Wix, Kenzen, MAPR Agency, Obsidian HR, Kickstart Fund, Promontory Mortgage, Molson Coors, and Comcast. And finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors. They're all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our virtual Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experience and moments of inspiration on social media.
Hello, I'm Sal Gentili, CEO of Friday Health Plans, and we're proud to sponsor the growth track this year at Denver Startup Week. We're a company that just entered a rapid growth phase, so we felt it was particularly appropriate. When my business partner and I started Friday Health Plans 5 years ago, we knew we wanted to create a company that catered to people who bought their own health insurance. The Affordable Care Act was just getting going, and we saw an opportunity to serve a brand new market of health insurance consumers. Independent consultants, startup groups, gig workers, service industry workers, designers, creators, and other independent professionals, like many of you here today. We knew that if we built a health plan that was simple to buy, easy to use, had great customer service, and most of all was affordable, we could compete against the big insurance plans who only focus on serving big companies. After spending 5 years getting into the Colorado market and completing a successful proof of concept, we successfully closed a $50 million round of growth funding earlier this year. We're now about to expand to 3 additional states later this year, hire more than 400 employees to support our growth, and eventually be in more than 10 states by 2025. I wish each of you good luck in your startup and growth pursuits. And as you think about your upcoming health insurance needs, I hope you consider fellow growing startup Friday Health Plans. Open enrollment starts November 1st. Check us out at FridayHealthPlans.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Jake Cohen, chair of the growth track at Denver Startup Week and member of the Denver Startup Week organizing committee. Thank you for joining us for our very first ever virtual Denver Startup Week. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we are more powerful when we come together as a community to share ideas and help make each other better. And here we are virtually showing the world what Denver is made of. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the intersectionality of those identities. There is something at Denver Startup Week for everyone, and we thank you for joining us. For our next session, I have the pleasure of introducing a couple I have worked with very closely with, and hopefully would consider me one of their friends. So with that, I get to introduce our revenue generation power couple, Jill and Alex Guest.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate the introduction. As Jake mentioned, we're the guests. We're going to be presenting on the marriage of marketing and sales today. Jill and I have been together for, decades and decades now, but
about 13 years.
There we go. Sure. That makes somewhat sense. But we've also been within the Denver tech community together for about a decade now. Jill actually got me into Denver Tech after she started SendGrid about 10 years ago. And we have been talking about putting this on for a couple of years now. So we're excited to be able to talk to everybody. And with that, I'm going to pass things off to my better half.
Awesome. So yes, hi everyone, Jill Guest here. I currently have the pleasure of leading the Lifecycle marketing and campaign operations teams at Twilio. And as Alex mentioned, I have been a part of this community for just about a decade since I started at SendGrid when we were about 30 people. I was lucky enough to see the company and the marketing department grow during that time from this tiny startup with a scrappy idea through our IPO and then a $3 billion acquisition by Twilio in the spring of last year. And so through that time, I've seen a lot about how a marketing department should be grown, how a self-service funnel can grow and be optimized. And now in my time at Twilio, learning quite a bit more about the more traditional sales-assisted function of marketing as well. So exciting to share a little bit about that with you.
And I'm Alex Guest. I'm currently the founder and CEO of FSP Consulting. We're a consultancy that helps startups with their revenue operations, their buyer journey. I got started in tech, as I mentioned, after Jill made her way into this wild world, and I got connected to the team at SendGrid, couldn't get enough. I landed my first sales gig about 9 years ago, and then since I've been in sales management leadership, and most recently was running revenue operations for Zestful, one of the track sponsors. Great team over there, and happy to see that they're still growing and kicking. So we'll go ahead and get things started off for you here today. Wanted to set a quick agenda on what we're going to be talking about. We also have this dueling banjo thing going where we're going to talk about how we got here, and then I'll cover scaling revenue operations before kicking things over to Jill on individualizing communications. I'll take things back over around iterative sales optimization, and then Jill will round things off on selling internally. So if you guys are ready, we will go ahead and get things started.
And we would love to see your questions in the chat, and we'll leave some time at the end to address those. So please, if you have questions along the way, add them in there.
Absolutely. We will have our contact information at the end as well. And there's an appendix in this slide deck that covers a couple of things that we'll touch on, but you might want to review later. So you'll be able to get that from the team at Denver Startup Week. So we've been talking a little bit about how we've gotten here. When we met, how long ago, 13 years, 17, 25, it was somewhere around there. But also want to talk about how the state of the relationship between marketing and sales has kind of brought us to this point. Everybody knows that marketing and sales can have an adversarial relationship at best sometimes. But ultimately, we're seeing a big shift in the way that consumers are looking and seeking out products, how they're buying them through kind of new customer journeys, and then also kind of the different internal handoffs that happen on the business side of things. So talking about where we're headed and really where we're at today, we're starting to see that salespeople are getting squeezed out of a lot of different functions within an organization. Traditionally, 20, 30 years ago, salespeople were the only ones that knew anything about the product that they were selling. There was no internet to go Google it. There was no Yelp for reviews. And since the internet has started to educate buyers more and more, we're also seeing functions like marketing or like sales engineering take up what traditionally was a sales role. It was kind of a singular role. The way that I like to think about this is on a scale of -1 to 1. My father's an attorney. He taught me that there's no such thing as black and white, so I try to have a lot of gray in there. So what I see happening in market right now is that revenue marketing, what Jill excels at, is starting to take up more of the self-service piece of the pie. It's automated. It's the buyer journey that everybody's used to. Self-service is the go to Amazon, find a product, get it shipped to you. You're never talking to a salesperson. On the extreme other side of that spectrum, there's the sales engineers. They are product experts. They're experts in the market. They're experts in how to be successful with whatever you're selling. And salespeople are getting squeezed from both ends. So you see fewer and fewer salespeople, and the salespeople that you do see need to start to evolve. Where I see a lot of opportunity is to learn from both sides of those spectrums where they're getting squeezed. I've learned a ton from my wife, Jill, about revenue marketing, about self-service that I've implemented within my own sales process, within the teams that I've run to help generate more revenue at scale. So we're going to be talking more about that section of this scale throughout the rest of the presentation today. Ultimately, how do we get there? So we need to communicate, we need to collaborate a lot better than we are today. Not every sales and marketing relationship is adversarial. Sometimes you get along really well with your other cross-functional leaders, but the best way to get things on the mend and start working together better is to just talk about it. So this is going to be the most kind of, I guess, marriage analogy that we'll have through this entire time. We didn't want to just shove it down everybody's throats here. But a couple of things that can help you improve your relationship and the collaboration that you have, not only with marketing, but with other cross-functional leaders across the organization, is first asking yourselves, how's your relationship today? And sharing that information with one another, because you could have a different perspective of how your relationship is with your marketing leader, with your success or your support leader. And until you get on the same page around where your relationship's at, there's not really a whole lot of point of moving anything forward. You then want to figure out why is that? Is it some underlying angst from the previous head of that organization or experience that you've had at other businesses where that relationship wasn't positive? Maybe it's more short-term things like your people aren't getting along. Really starting to uncover why you don't have the relationship that you want to have today is going to be paramount to improving things moving forward. The next question is for yourself. This is not a question that you ask or you impose upon the other leader. That never works out in any relationship, saying, why aren't you doing this? Why haven't you done the dishes recently?
You're doing it all wrong.
Exactly. You're doing it all wrong. Nobody likes that. Just like any relationship, any professional relationship, you need to better understand how you can improve first before you expect anything to improve outside. The next thing, when's your date night? Or maybe lunch, you're probably not in the office anymore, so maybe just do a Zoom coffee, but have a standing one-on-one where you're not just talking about business. It's not just the metrics. It's not just the accountability data that you share and that you look at in every board meeting or QBR. This is really something for you to build a more personal relationship with your other cross-functional peers. And then finally, you need to ask yourself, are the kids all right? So your teams, that's gonna be a big piece of this. So top level, if you don't have a positive relationship with your other functional peers, likely your team's picking up on that. So until you can lead from example, you shouldn't really worry about them too much. But once you do get your relationship on track and in a better spot, then you need to make sure that your team is in a good place as well.
And also understanding what is their perspective. They are working closely with their counterparts in other parts of the organization all the time. So listening to them can sometimes be the canary in the coal mine if something isn't going quite right, if there's something that you don't know about the customer experience. So it's not just, parents talking down to the kids, but it's a two-way conversation and you should be listening as well.
Yeah, one really effective strategy that I actually learned from Jill in her time at Sendrit and Twilio is getting people cross-functional buddies the day that they start. So when they come into your organization, assign them a buddy or maybe multiple buddies, and that should be a relationship that extends the first 1, 2, maybe 3 months into their time there. And where it's nice to have that person on their own team, sometimes that can just be repetitive and they're just hearing the same things from the same group they're going to be working with. By having a cross-functional buddy, that can sometimes build and strengthen those same bonds.
Absolutely.
Finally, in how to improve relationships, I really appreciate when people recommend books to me. I like recommending books to other people. I think this helps a lot when you're trying to understand your cross-functional partners, maybe some of the theories or methodologies that they are working from to build their organization. suggest a book that makes sense and that's going to give them a little bit more information about how you're running your org, and have them recommend a book back. Jill has recommended Inbound Marketing to me, I think maybe 6 months after I started in sales, and it was really powerful, and it helped me sell better because I better understood our marketing counterparts.
Yes. And likewise, To Sell is Human, along with several other Daniel Pink books. I know he's one of Alex's favorite authors. And it was a great crash course, not in only how to think like a sales rep, but how to advocate and use human selling tactics to succeed in your career and life.
Thinking like a salesperson, that's dangerous.
Well, I'm married to one, so already dangerous.
Ooh, need to be careful. All right, so that's the quick intro. It's where we've been, it's where we're at, it's where we're going. Want to dive into scaling revenue operations. So I'm going to be talking about evaluating and investing in my first section, and then after Jill, I will finish things up with the optimization of your revenue operations. So one of the first things that you need to do is you need to take a look at what I see as being the 3 core pieces of your revenue operations. And when I reference revenue operations, I'm referencing everything from your awareness funnel in marketing all the way through customer churn. And I see there really being 3 pieces to that. There's your people, your processes, so the things that those people do, and then your systems. Your systems are things that carry your processes. Sometimes it can be more complicated processes, maybe how you work cross-functionally, that can be a system, but usually it's going to be more your technology stack. So the connection between your Marketo marketing automation instance and your Salesforce CRM, there's going to be processes that cross those 2 systems, if that makes sense. Starting off in sales, I have a lot more experience as it relates to the individuals in that evaluation process. And I definitely recommend the image that you see on the left side of your screen. This is Miller Hyman's sales relationship process matrix. Essentially on the y-axis, it's got your sales team and their sophistication. And on the x-axis, it's got your process sophistication. So you can see there are 3 different sections here in which you're categorizing the level of sophistication of your organization. It's important to start with this level of evaluation because when you're looking to invest in things, you need to know where you're starting at. If you do not have a sophisticated process or a sophisticated team and you try to jump to step 10, you're going to feel a ton of pain. Take baby steps and slow things down. Ultimately, learned a lot from some of Jill's iterative and scaling processes that you can't jump into the deep end of the pool with a hyper-personalized one-to-one marketing communication campaign. Similarly, as you're looking to scale your revenue operations, you can't expect that people are just going to be picking things up and running with them right off the bat. This is a statistic that I have mixed feelings about, that salespeople only spend 32% of their time selling. I think there's good to that. I think as salespeople are becoming better revenue engineers, they are spending more time on call prep, on research, on personalization, on follow-up. They also have those mandatory things like updating Salesforce. I had a great sales leader back in the day that used to say, I pay you a salary, so you fill out Salesforce. Everything else on top of that's your commission. So it was always clear to us that we had these baseline things that we needed to do. I think there's also a lot when it comes to the process and the systems that aren't optimized that really slow salespeople down. Maybe they're not going to spend much more of their time directly selling, but it would be nice to have those systems and processes get out of their way. So when you're evaluating your people, when you're evaluating your processes, when you're evaluating your system, I like to think of things as these different inflection points. So you have these you have these functional groups across your organization, like marketing, sales, success, and support. And when you're evaluating people, you should not evaluate people just based off of a single metric. A salesperson that brings in a ton of revenue might not be your best salesperson if none of those people stay in the door. They all churn out. Similarly, when I was just the starting sales rep, I had a bit of a competition with another sales rep that had been on the top of the leaderboard for a number of years. We constantly switch back and forth every other month on who is performing. And then I ended up finding out that I only offered discounts in about 9% of my deals. He offered discounts in 47% of his deals. So that has a material impact on your business. So as you're taking a look at your people, your processes, your systems, don't just evaluate them on a single metric. Make sure that you have those key accountability metrics, but then you also have responsibility metrics that are helping balance those people's productivity. Once you're in a good spot, you feel like you've evaluated things, the next step before you start investing is to really map out your buyer journey. I don't feel like enough organizations actually build a diagram. It's something that marketing knows their piece of the buyer journey, and sales knows their piece, and success knows their piece. But when you try to mash those all together, that's where you get conflict. Making sure that everybody's on the exact same page on what that buyer journey is helps a lot. And to do that, diagramming it and making sure that everybody can visualize that not only helps with the communication and collaboration, but it can help you identify points where you might want to invest and improve things. As you're building that diagram, link it to relevant resources. Maybe you drop it into a wiki, whether you use something like Confluence or it's just a simple internal wiki like Google Docs. Link it all in there, so if somebody wants more detail, they can review it at another time. You want to make sure when you're bringing people into the organization, you train them at a functional level, not only for their piece of the customer journey, or that buyer journey, but also the inflection points on either side. So a salesperson would learn about the buyer's journey as it impacts their role, but you'd also want to teach them about any shared metrics and process with marketing, and then the same with customer success. So when you start to map these things out, I like to think of it as Mario levels. So you have those different stages in your level. You have the marketing, you have the sales, you have the success, and that overworld is really the buyer journey piece of it. That is where your person is going through, jumping through hoops, diving down pipes to learn more about your product and your organization. On the other side, you have the internal kind of when you go into the caverns in Mario, and that's going to be more of your internal processes and systems. You want to take a look at these kind of X and Y axis because that's how you're going to discover ways that you can optimize and scale that system. Making things simple, I like to have some sort of iconography. So maybe your Goombas are your content, maybe your mushrooms are education pieces that you are filtering out to those people. Your reporting is going to be top right of the screen at all time, understanding where they're at, how long they've been there. And again, this is going to help you improve things over time. Ultimately, I know not everybody has the same affinity towards video games that I do, but I would recommend tools like Whimsically. They're another local Denver startup that helps with workflow visualization. You're probably also familiar with things like Lucidchart or Draw.io. I have some of that information in the appendix along with the lean project management style of visualization, just in case you didn't want to go with the Mario theme. Before I hand things off here, one last statistic that only 19% of businesses are actually aligning their buyer journey to what's going on inside the business. And I think that's just appalling. It's tough to really try to improve anything within your organization or outside of your organization if you're not aligned to it. So align yourself to it. And it's not just communication, collaboration with your marketing partners, it's also that with your customers. So give them a call and collaborate with them. Whether you have them today or it's more aspirational, start interviewing your ideal customer profile. Start interviewing the people that left your organization and have them tell you how you could have done better. Because ultimately, you need to start off asking yourself the question, what can I do to improve?
Awesome, thank you. So yes, it's very clear, given your video game background, who did the graphics for this slide presentation. So I'd like to thank you for that. And I know this slide makes me slightly hungry, but in terms of investment, it's not just from a sales perspective where you invest your energy, your people's energy, but certainly from a marketing perspective, that is hugely critical. Marketing budgets, are a substantial portion of the budget for a growing company. So it's important that we're allocating that wisely. So one thing that I've learned more and more over the years that I intuitively know as a consumer and avid shopper, but that is the importance of getting as individualized as you can with all of your communications, and where possible, trying to almost mimic that one-to-one discussion with a sales professional when you're talking about larger communications. So obviously you have your entire audience, anyone in the world or in your network that could buy your product. Marketers have been good for ages about segmenting that. We know that different types of buyers have different needs and use cases. But really where there is so much opportunity to develop further right now is past segmentation and into true hyper-personalized, level of personalization where you can serve them exactly what they want at the time that they want through the channel that they prefer. And that's really where the power is. So, I know this is a known fact for, I'm sure, any marketer in the audience, but it bears repeating that one-to-many marketing is tired. And there's different possibilities throughout the funnel. So, when we're talking about awareness tactics like broadcast or out of home, it's not always possible to get to something personalized or even that deeply segmented. If you have a billboard, there's only so much personalization that you can get to. But then once you start to enter the consideration aspects of the funnel, maybe where you have some paid social or some retargeting or some starting to get into some email marketing, here you can start to learn more about the person that you're communicating with. And I say with because it's not to, it's more of an actual dialogue at that point. And then when it comes to the decision-making point, one-to-many marketing is just not effective anymore. And it's something that everybody sees through. It's very, I guess it's marketing of the past. So let's do better. So first, we can't talk about personalization without talking about the guidelines, because there is a fine line between leveraging the data you have on customers and prospective customers to your advantage and to them, so you can serve them exactly what they're looking for. You can also find it very easy to overstep the line into the creep factor. So we want to be aware of that. And then also privacy concerns. We want to, as brands, always be very cognizant of the type of information that our people we're trying to reach want out there, and to not be creepy or overstep our bounds in any way. So when it comes to what we can personalize off of, obviously firmographics and demographics are a huge opportunity there. A lot of this is readily available based on the type of information that those prospects volunteer, or even third-party data, although I would caution everyone to be careful when it comes to trusting third-party enriched data, but still really good insight to have into that. Also shared preferences. So, if you're a retailer and somebody visits your site, you can learn a lot by how they navigate and also what preferences they say. Like, I'm here for, women's clothing versus men's clothing, or, and any sort of way you want to slice and dice that. But taking every specific piece of data that they have expressly shared with you and leveraging that to its fullest, that is hugely important, and can be some of your most actionable data. Also, web and app engagement. So how are they navigating your website? What pieces of content are they consuming? If you have an application that they need to log into, you can learn a ton by the pages that they're visiting and the pages that they will start and then drop off from. You'll kind of get a clue into some of what they may be needing. And then if you are fortunate enough to have big data resources or some software out there, getting into predictive analytics, sort of the customers like you also purchased XYZ, like the famous Amazon model, can be absolutely huge. I know that not everybody has those resources, but there are things that you can do to kind of work up to that by segmenting your database and understanding the types of use cases that they have. In terms of where, this is where we get into channels. So I think when many marketers think about personalization, email is the first thing that comes to mind. I should note that when I talk about personalization here, using hi Jill at the front of your email is not really what I mean. It is personalization and it is a good thing to try. Many of us are collecting things like the user's first name when they sign up or fill out a form. But you are not going to realize the ROI gains for personalization by that level of personalization. So I really challenge you to dig deeper than the low-hanging fruit. In addition to email, and I'll cover an example of how we've done this in a little bit, but between in-app, website, push, SMS, and then social and digital channels, there's still a ton of opportunity with new technology to get super personalized. Wherever a user sees your name and would see a message or an ad from you, there's a ton of opportunity to kind of connect those data sources now. And then in terms of where, it's important that you tie this to your buyer journey and also your customer life cycle, which I'll detail here in a minute. But look for clues there for when users are hitting certain milestones like completing sign up or upgrade, or maybe they left and have been unengaged for a while and they return to your site after a break, or even signs that they may be nearing exhaustion. These are all opportunities to trigger a message. And I know in my experience as a marketer and talking with others in the profession, those messages that are triggered based on a user's action are almost always going to be much more effective in earning their engagement and getting them to engage with the message and follow the CTA that you want to present to them. All right, so wanted to take you through, I know Alex talked a bit about the buyer's journey. As a kind of full funnel self-service marketer, I think about this as the full journey of a sign up. So, the old days where marketing's job was at step one and then it goes to sales and support and success and so on, is still true in many organizations. But as Alex alluded to earlier, those lines of where marketing begins and ends has changed a lot. So if you are getting started or if you're expanding the purview of what messages marketing sends to your customers, I would really encourage you to go through an exercise like this. So this is a simplified and partially redacted version of the customer lifecycle research that I conducted at Twilio. And I would recommend you do something kind of similar in terms of understanding the major lifecycle phases and the major milestones associated with those phases. So for us, it looks something like, a very long period of learning and research. This could be days to months, even years, frankly, depending on the product that your company is selling. And during that time, they can see you live in an event. They can visit your website or pricing page, any number of things. Then there's sign up, both sign up start and sign up complete. For many, SaaS companies, amongst others, there can often be a drop off between sign up start and sign up complete. So I think it's important to look at these two things independently. Then through activation and scaling up, this is really where the focus should be much more on understanding what they need, what resources you can serve to them to get them to reach that next step faster. And then focusing on upgrade and sort of growing their revenue with you. But happy customers will want to find success on the app, particularly if you have a free trial or a freemium model. They'll want to know that they can find success with that before they really scale up. And then through the remainder of their life cycle, this is kind of a balancing act of retention, referral, and cross-sell motion. Assuming you have more than one product or service that you want to sell. So this is where understanding their usage patterns, how they're using your product and how they're interacting with you on your website to understand what's the next most appropriate thing to offer to them. And then also routinely surveying them. We do an NPS survey quarterly. So customers get it periodically throughout the year. and also opportunities for them to refer their friends has been hugely impactful. In addition to the timeline and mapping out these touch points of the types of communications you should consider sending when, I also found a ton of value in documenting the pain points and positive moments from the customer experience. I would urge everyone to incorporate kind of your gut in this, but lead with other research that's been done. So for me, I look at NPS verbatims, transcripts from customer interviews, other research from like our UI UX team when they are talking with customers while they're going through the process. It's important to anchor this as much in real customer experience data points than in your gut, but it is important to kind of show kind of a variety of these customer anecdotes. And then from all of this, you can distill it down into the recommended interventions. So either things that you as a lifecycle marketer can do, or others within your marketing or sales or support departments, and also share this with product. There can be a lot that they can do. And I know that personally, it is a really good jumping off point for thoughtful conversations with product. So this would be my recommendation.
Absolutely. And I think talking about customer lifecycle marketing, that's the important piece. It's the buyer journey from awareness to churn. And I think that's where a lot of sales leaders, revenue leaders miss out, where revenue leaders know about the milestones, the timelines, the touch points. They talk about that in their cadence. They're missing out on things like the customer experience, the recommendations on interventions, being able to carry this not just through this initial funnel or journey, but on those inflection points all the way through is very important. And where I'd love to see more Mario on this chart. This is exactly what I'm talking about, on actually diagramming it out and sharing it with your teams and making sure that everybody's on the same page.
Yes, and feel free to use this as a guide. It's very colorful. All right, so kind of zooming back into a very specific use case when it comes to personalization, cannot neglect talking about one of my favorite examples of kind of the most personalized endeavor that my team and I have taken on. So this is our annual campaign. We call it Your Year in Email. And it is SendGrid and now Twilio's opportunity to for each individual customer, share with them how they performed during the year from a delivery and engagement perspective, and also delivering big data insights like their best day of the week for their specific customers to want to receive that message, which day is going to give them the best performance, as well as year-over-year trends for those of us who have been, or for those customers who have been with us for a few years. So, this is not a small undertaking. There's a ton of data and a ton of internal bandwidth, both on the lifecycle marketing team as well as big data. We work closely with customer success and sales to get their perspective and kind of understand how their customers that they talk with every day would perceive this. And then a ton of QA and whatnot to actually send. But it is a wonderful opportunity, not just to connect with customers, but to really reiterate the value that you've provided throughout the year. So I kind of think of it as something like Spotify's year in review, although it's less sexy, and that's fine. But yeah, definitely something that for us for many years was kind of the holy grail of personalization, and I'm excited every year that it goes out.
It's awesome.
Thank you. And we also have seen really excellent results from this. First, strong engagement. That campaign in and of itself has about a 20% higher open rate than average campaigns that go out to that type of list size, that time of year. So for a single campaign, it's an excellent opportunity to engage. What is exciting about this is, for those that engage, we found that they have a statistically significant higher likelihood of engaging with other emails and also returning to log back into the application for the next 60 days. So it's not just a one and done. It is, you are clearly providing value over the long term by getting to that level of personalization. Over the years that we've been doing this, we also have encouraged new feature usage for thousands of customers and have record-breaking ROI. Of any single marketing email that we send throughout the year, this is the one that not only delights customers, but actually is a revenue driver, which is very exciting to see and makes it easier to justify investing the time in it for the next year. And I have been talking a lot about investment. And so I know that some folks, especially with small teams or small budgets, can be a little overwhelmed with all of the opportunities to personalize and all the different channels to personalize within. But I would say that there is something, the silver lining of COVID-19 is for marketing practitioners, there is no time like the present to fight for budget to try these things. Twilio commissioned a survey at the beginning of COVID or a couple months in. It was a blind survey of 2,500 business leaders from around the world, asking them about how COVID-19 has influenced their digital transformation. And companies said that it accelerated their digital communication strategy by 6 years. And on top of that, 70% of technology companies said that they are interested in adding additional channels into their communication strategy. So there is no time like the present, and we'll use that as a good opportunity to try new things.
It's interesting where you were talking about starting off learning from how salespeople personalize and communicate and relay into marketing. I think there's a feedback loop that you can't miss either. That yes. The amount of personalization that can be done at scale from a marketing perspective can also be brought down to more of a one-to-one communication style between sales reps. Things like platform usage. If you do have a free trial, if you allow people to demo your product, your salespeople should be in there and they should be taking a look at what's going on in the demo, what's going on in the free trial, referencing that in their emails. And by collaborating, communicating with your marketing partners, you can get it into a place where the lifecycle marketing is really supporting everything from awareness to churn. And then you can have these bigger impact points throughout that buyer journey using the same data.
Yeah, absolutely. That combination of kind of air cover and ground control. I'm not good at these analogies, but yes, humans to do that one-to-one outreach while also having kind of the air cover from Lifecycle is a good method.
So we started out with the dense stuff. We'll breeze through these next couple of sections in our last 15 minutes here to make sure that we leave a few for questions at the end. So talking about iterative sales optimization, you've evaluated your team, your process, your systems. You're starting to take a look at where you're going to invest based off of that buyer journey diagram and how you're working cross-functional with your partners. The next thing that I suggest as you're investing and as you're looking to really optimize is to go back to middle school science class and the scientific method. I mean, it's tried and true. There's a reason that scientists around the world use this. You need to make those observations, ask the right questions, form hypothesis, start to develop different predictions. And I think what's most important is how you develop the test. What I see a lot of startups get caught up on is testing too many things at the same time. So you can't go back through root cause analysis and figure out what actually had a positive or negative impact, or they are not holding the right control variables. So just like a scientist in the lab, you want to make sure that you're structuring those tests in a scientific way so you can continue to improve and optimize or jettison when something's not working out. On top of that, you also need to be cognizant of different biases. So specifically the things that I see people get caught up on are like confirmation bias. So you know what you want your results to be. Guess what? With data, you can probably tell that story no matter what you do. So be careful as you're structuring these tests and what success looks like and how you're measuring which metrics, that you're not just leading the witness. Sometimes that's yourself, sometimes that's your organization, sometimes it's a cross-functional partner. That's going to do more harm than good. Another one, observation bias. This one's tough, especially with individual contributors. If you are telling them what the experiment is and what the results should be, chances are they are going to naturally drive it in that direction. That could be bad because that's not kind of the resting state of your organization, your function, or your revenue generation. So give them enough information to be dangerous and to make sure that the test stays on the rails. But then after that, you don't want to give them too much detail because that can impact the results of that experiment. Another one that I always like to talk about is bandwagon, particularly when it comes to salespeople doing tests of any kind. You always have that one person on your sales team that's going to speak up in a meeting and say, I don't agree with this. I don't know. I have a different opinion. That can be dangerous because then you get this bandwagon effect where multiple people on the team are going to follow that person. So be careful about that. Be careful about the way that you solicit these different ideas and tests. I like testing on a smaller team of kind of crack shot sales people. Maybe they get some additional benefit in compensation, in career development, in freedom or latitude to participate in these tests. And then that way you can cut down on having a smaller test with fewer controls and the right test variables without things getting out of control from a person level, because people are the worst things when it comes to experiments. We are the least predictable. Next is how you do all of this testing. So I talked about lean project management before. I really like that. It's a more simplified version, but salespeople can operate under agile too. It's something that I've done at the last 2 startups that I've been a part of. I've run my team in an agile format. And the nice thing when you do this is that you can start to fit into other agile teams. Product and engineering teams tend to be those that are in an agile format in most startups here in and around Denver. So when they have their program increment, you can stagger your, as I call them, sales intervals or SIs off one sprint. So when they make a release, you have the notes, your salespeople can start selling it. Maybe you have a marketing team that runs agile as well. Then you can have 3 staggered cadences where the product's built and released, marketing applies their magic when it comes to landing pages, content, getting it out in the world. And then after that's complete, sales can come in and they can start to clean up some of that revenue.
Yes, and as you know, we're building a presentation to talk about the marriage of marketing and sales. I would feel remiss if I didn't spend some time to really talk about probably the single biggest thing that I have learned, you know, in a lot of conversations at that dinner table or on this couch. Well, this is our home, welcome, would be selling internally. And I know, you know, as a marketer, it's not always the easiest to find the best ways to toot your own horn and to promote yourself and your team. But it is an area that I've learned a lot. And a lot of that relies on data. So this is a good quote from former Netscape CEO Jim Barksdale. If we have data, let's look at data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with them. And I don't know if this sounds familiar to anybody else. I know with some of the folks that I work with, past and present, it definitely, I've learned that data goes a hugely long way. And there is a ton to look at from a marketing metrics perspective. We all have these. So this is like a very small selection of some of the metrics that you may be tracking every day. Something that I have learned is that tracking every metric for every project or campaign or every program kind of adds to that analysis paralysis that is not necessarily going to get you where you want to be, not just from an internal selling standpoint, but also you know, moving the needle in a major way. So picking one North Star metric, or maybe you have a sub metric for major programs, but to really limit this as much as possible. So you understand the metric that you have the biggest ability to influence, and so others within the organization can know you and your team as the team that's going to make a really big difference on average revenue per user, for example. That sometimes less is more, and to really focus it on the metrics that matter can be hugely important.
Perfect.
And that's it. So we'll take some questions, but thanks again to Denver Startup Week and all of our sponsors. Excited to be a part of it again this year, and looking forward to taking some questions.
All right, let me pull up the chat here and we'll see what came in as we were talking. Assuming it's going to let me click into this. Maybe not. Don't worry, we work in technology companies, everybody. Here we go. Okay, copy of the slides, absolutely. So feel free to email me, so guest@bucksalespeople.com, FSP for short. Self-loathing sales professional, I think we need to adapt and evolve. It's more of a tongue-in-cheek thing. So feel free to email me directly. We'll also be sharing those slides with Denver Startup Week. Looks like Catherine was asking the same thing. It looks like Kayla's got a good question here. So I'm new to the company and I'm building the marketing department. What's the best way that I can integrate with sales early? I think you should take it first, and then I might be able to talk about the connection to sales.
Yeah, well, congratulations, Kayla. That's super exciting. I would say at a high level, my biggest piece of advice would be to start building connections. That's probably exactly what you were going to say. But know your sales leader and the other leaders that are in the major customer facing departments and make them your best friend. Have a lot of conversations about where there are huge opportunities to make an impact from a marketing perspective, what some of the pain points might be, and what keeps them up at night. And I think that is a really great, initial foot to start out on.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. I think starting those relationships and the communication early is going to be very important. As you're starting off, it sounds like maybe you already have a sales team. If you don't, I would put off sales probably as long as you can if you're at a startup, because revenue marketing, self-serve can do a lot before you really need to start to bring in sales professionals, especially sales leadership. That's one of the toughest hires. VP of sales has a 10-year average of about 18 months right now. So that's going to be a critical hire for your organization to see success. If you're hiring that person, you get the opportunity to build that kind of communication, that shared understanding at the interview process. If you're coming in and you're building marketing on an existing engine, make sure that you're learning from everything that they've suffered, the pain they felt, where they feel like they can gain efficiencies. And you're going to be their hero if you take a bunch of time, effort, and energy off their plate.
Yeah, and I think kind of at the same time, at being the marketing leader, you will probably have done a lot of research, or will be doing a lot of research into the total addressable market, where they live, the types of personas that you're reaching. So if you can also come to the table with that type of data at the same time, I feel like that relationship with your marketing counterpart, sales counterpart, is going to be really off to a good start.
Yeah, and don't be above bribery either. I mean, being in Denver, every sales leader is either going to be into whiskey, coffee, or climbing. So chances are you can probably nail one of those two things, or one of those three things.
It looks like we have other comments in the chat.
There's some things in chat, so let me see if there are any questions. What about non-digital products and real things is a question. It looks like that came in pretty early, so that was likely part of the evaluate and the invest thing. I don't see the difference between a digital product and a physical product being that drastic when you're talking about the buyer journey. They're still going to go through that process that Jill mentioned around kind of that awareness consideration. They might be doing that in a way that you can't see them. If it's a CPG, a consumer packaged good, you might never know who that person is. If it's something like a brand new car, that person's going to do a lot of discovery up front before they ever go talk to somebody. You can still map out that buyer journey in the same way. I would say you're most reliant on interviews with the consumer at that point, because anything internal is going to be kind of this proto persona, this proto buyer journey. Get out, find the people that have purchased your product, that didn't purchase your product, and ask them about that journey and start to map out what's successful.
Yeah, I agree. I think customer anecdotes and actually having those conversations with customers, or those that were almost customers and chose to not buy, you don't have the other kind of like digital stalking options to learn about them. So yeah, just try to get in front of them and ask them as many questions as possible.
So let's see, we got about 5 minutes left. We'll try to hit as many of these as we can. When it comes to communication, how are you able to maintain brand image voice through these different channels? That is a great question.
That's a great question. I would say, at a high level, I recommend, since as your organization grows, you are likely not going to have the same people managing each individual channel, but it is super important that they are speaking the same language. Having a brand standards, published sort of like manual for people, and including content style, like a content style guide. And have that something that is periodically reviewed, that people, not just like know exists, but actually like, part of their process is to go through a review of that periodically, I think is really important. And then particularly for any communications that are going to be like long-lived or ongoing, to do maybe like a quarterly review of that, make sure that that is still in line with the major, messages that you're putting out into the market, and everything is still relevant. But yeah, I mean, kind of one of the themes of this talk being a strong communication, and when you have, sales reps in the mix too, it's important that everyone internally is just speaking the same language and that there's a common lexicon for folks.
Yeah, definitely train your salespeople on it. Make sure that it's something that they have on their desktop the day that they start. Maybe you print it out, you put it in their desk once everything's back to normal and we're all in the office together. But until then, make sure that they know it, because salespeople will break your stuff. They will tear apart a PDF. They will change a deck. I am horrible about that. I will completely redo something when I'm testing and iterating myself to see what is making the most sense. So just expect that it's going to happen. And one of the ways that I find that you can cater to it is by making modular content. So if you have content, if you have a one sheet, if you have a slide deck, make sure that there's that backbone, that core that maybe consists of 70% of it, but based off of the personalization that your salespeople have learned from your marketing team, they can go in there and they can drop pre-approved language or slides or imagery that's really going to help it feel personalized at the sales communication level.
Yep.
What about info for small companies or startups? That was right as we switched things over. So I'm guessing that was probably talking about the tail end of your first section.
Yeah, so that may have been a reference to some of the hyper-personalization stuff. So I definitely recognize not all companies, in fact, probably few companies have like the true resources to not just like collect all this data, but to make, structure unstructured data, analyze it all, take it all together into a data warehouse or a CDP. So I recognize that there's a lot to invest in there, but it's okay to start small. When that first slide where we have like the segmentation and then personalization, it's okay to be really personalized on some channels, and then for channels that you don't have that level of data, or you're still doing a lot of testing to figure out what your customers want and what messaging resonates with them, it's okay to take more of the segmentation approach. And so, yeah, I would say start small where you have a high amount of confidence, and then, grow over time. And if you're doing a lot of personalization and you can prove that you have an increase in engagement or attach, or a better, NPS, then that helps make those conversations a little easier when you ask for additional budget.
Start small, start slow. I like the confidence piece. Talking about the marriage, Jill has or you take care of the phone bill.
Yes.
So as T-Mobile understands our two phones, they are both Jill guests. So I will often get SMS or push notifications where I can tell when T-Mobile has sold my information to a third party, because it says, hey, Jill guests, don't forget to do this, or to vote, or to do one of these things. So I know exactly where that data is coming from. They have some basic level data, but they obviously don't have high confidence in it. So start small, because you're going to step on some toes. You're going to get some bad responses from people, but generally you got to start somewhere. So we're up on time, everybody. There's one last question there around the books. We're going to be sending these slides to Denver Startup Week. If there are any other questions that we missed, we'll definitely respond. Feel free to connect to us via email or on LinkedIn. Yes. Jill's jguest at Twilio.com. I'm guest at foxsalespeople.com, FSP for short. Thanks for the time, everybody. Really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.